Welcome to the T C Random Fandom podcast. We are here to have fun and talk all things pop culture, collecting, and nerd culture in general. Make sure you join the conversation during our live stream with our most excellent hosts, Craig Borden and Tommy Mach. Let the shenanigans begin.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the TNC Random Fandom podcast. I am your host, Craig Borden. With me remotely this week, Tommy Mach. How the heck are we, buddy?
I'm doing good. Greetings from sunny Long Beach, California, where it's a balmy like 60 some odd degrees. And I know that you guys are in the middle of another blizzard, so enjoy that.
Close to an ice storm outside, but it's not a big deal. I know my Canadian friends in Toronto are trying to dig themselves out of their apartments, so shout out to all my friends that are north of the border. They're hopefully doing everything well and safe. But yeah, it's a little interesting over here in Lake Ontario proximity compared to Long Beach, my friend. I've been to Long Beach many a times when you and I, funny enough, never went there together, but that was one of the
Mhm.
places I got to go regularly when we worked at Harris. Bunch of National Guard sites that were kind of in that same area that I used to hang out at Huntington Beach rather often.
Nice,
So it was
nice.
kind of in the middle of all the job sites. So good stuff.
As a
So
matter of
how are the
fact,
travels keeping you?
they're good. Tonight we're going to be doing dinner in Manhattan Beach, which one of Karen's high school friends. He actually is a sound editor for Hollywood. I'm not sure if
Nice.
if he's specific to a one studio or if he just does it for whatever movie gets his firm or whatever. But yeah, we're going to be sitting and having dinner with him and his wife, and it's going to be pretty interesting. I know that last time he was in town in Rochester, he wanted to talk to me all about the game show stuff. Which again, I'm going to bring it up again because I can, but that's just me. But yeah, so I'm just going to say, honestly, it's going to be fun. So,
Good
but yeah,
stuff.
so what are we talking about this week?
So
Like people
Tommy,
don't know.
I know we didn't really have the best of ideas this week, but you and I always seem to figure out one. And we both, and I believe your wife was the one that actually was one of the catalysts to this conversation. But we all kind of thought about the same thing. Well, you're at Disney World. Why don't we talk about theme parks and seeing you're at
Yep.
Disneyland and goofing around and having a good time? So that was the idea tonight. We're going to talk all things Disney World and the land of imagination that is the theme parks that Walt Disney created and have continued to be I'll just say a mecca of fandom, really, at the end of the day.
Hmm.
There's some certain little quirks of things going on now because they're slowly pricing themselves into a bracket where people, you and I, can't even get our families to Disney
Right.
World. But that's a whole nother argument for later in the show. But the quality of the product has always been there. You've been to both the parks. I've been to them over the years. I have friends that still work for Disney. It's been a wonderful experience every time I went. I will say the last time I was there, I don't really remember a ton because drinking around the world was involved at Epcot. That's all I'm going to say. But you were obviously just at Disneyland. Give us the
Mhm.
what you did on your most recent visit.
So there's two parks in California, and they're literally side by side from each other. You have uh, obviously Disneyland at the actual park, and then across the walkway, boardwalk, I guess I won't even call it that, but whatever. Um, they have California Adventure, which we did not go to. So California Adventure is the semi newest park. I remember it was kind of new at the tail end of the 90s. I think that's when it came about. Um, and it was all right. But the I went to Disneyland, or I should say, we went to Disneyland, and it was Disneyland. It is there's attractions at Disneyland that you can't get in Florida. And yesterday was actually considered a low crowd day, but and as I said this in my extra long post, was there's a group of it just there's a lot of people and it's compact, so it's not enough to where you can spread people out and go to different parks and everything. So it's kind of you still have to kind of traverse your way through a sea of people every so often. But no, it was pretty cool. So like Galaxy's Edge is pretty much identical to that of what it's like at Disney World. Just some of the main props that they have are kind of just in different locations, but for the most part, from where you would get on Rise of the Resistance to when you go into like all of the major shops and everything, and then even to where Smuggler's Run is at, it's all pretty much the exact same. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is one I haven't been able to do yet. I haven't been down to any of the Disney theme parks since the Star Wars stuff got obviously integrated. When I was going, obviously, with Star Tours,
Mhm.
some of that stuff in that little remote area at Hollywood Studios and goofing around like that. But at the end of the day, it's always fun to just have whatever pieces it is. I do have to ask, one being the giant Indiana Jones fan, did you go on the Indiana Jones ride?
Yes, I did. And the thing about Indiana Jones is that ride is only at Disneyland in California. That ride is not in Florida. The only thing that they have as far as Indiana Jones in Florida, at least from last year, was the Stunt Spectacular, which they still do. Some of
But it's
it
still very
actually,
cool.
it is very cool, but there was a couple of times that we saw it and they actually like cut it short because somebody actually got hurt. Believe it or not,
Eek.
even though it's very contained and well choreographed and everything, people still get hurt during those things. So it's
Still a
yeah,
stunt, to your
yep,
point.
yep. But no, but the ride itself is awesome. I enjoyed that ride, and that was actually, I believe, Karen wasn't sure if she had been on that ride before. She's like, she vaguely remembers it, but if there is a ride that's kind of close to that in Florida, it would be the dinosaur ride at Animal Kingdom, which I think
I enjoyed
eventually
that ride too.
I think they're going to
I
be
wouldn't.
changing that ride.
I heard they were updating it to an actual theme instead of it just being the dinosaurs.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't remember what, but that was one of those things I remember scrolling across and finding out, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. Get an update to something like that. I just remember going on that dinosaur one, and you're bombing around in the virtual VF or virtual ATV kind of like thing, right? And then the dinosaur just all of a sudden comes at
Yep.
you out of nowhere.
Yep.
So
The thing is, it's very jerky too. But the Indiana Jones ride is, you're bouncing around and it's, you get some good drops in it, but it's not a roller coaster. It's on a track, but it's just the way that the vehicle moves is it's actually pretty cool. So if you're not
yeah,
familiar with it, it's a ride that you definitely want to go on and make sure that you get the lightning lane pass for.
yeah. I've always been enamored with the rides and just the theme park industry and stuff. And I think that's just the engineer in me. It was like, oh wow, that would have been a really cool career path to get into. But I don't know that guy to be able to get into that one. So it is what it is. On Disney Plus, one of the first things that they had on that whole platform was this documentary for the Imagineers, which is their code word for the engineers that do all the theme park engineering and stuff like that. So they showed how they made the dinosaur ride and the Indiana Jones ride. It is actually more or less, when you look at it with the lights off and are on and everything in the whole place, it's more or less a big concrete warehouse with these vehicles that drive around, but they're nice and smooth for where they drive around. But the thing that you're on is another platform on top of the wheeled car. And that's what's making you do the whole herky jerky motions and the drops. And it's
Mhm.
like having one of these Star Wars tours simulator on a car. So you're moving around with that whole mechanism, being able to, do whatever you need to do for the cool, fun parts of the ride. So that was really interesting.
It's funny you should say that because I actually was thinking about that because again, the engineering mind kind of takes over and you start thinking about it, and it's just like how they actually play to your senses. So you're really not. I mean, you may be on just in a box that's on an actuator that's moving around, but because of the visual stimulation that you're getting, you get that sensation like you're actually moving in space and things are going, and it's just the way that they can sync up the visual aspect to the movement of this actuator, this box. You know, it's astonishing of what they've done with just simulation, and
Yeah.
it puts you in there. One thing that I want to throw in there at you about Star Tours, though, is that they've actually updated Star Tours. Now it's still in the same location. It's not even part of Galaxy's
Yeah.
Edge, and that's that same thing for both parks. It's still wherever they first had it, and it stayed
Mhm.
there. And so they just not like they picked it up and moved it to the Galaxy's Edge, but they've updated it to where you get like 3 or 4 different scenarios that you can fly into now. So like
I think it's even past
they've
that now, Tommy.
added stuff for like to incorporate Andor and Ahsoka. You know, so they've updated the ride really well, and you don't even have the same. You don't have, I think it's Rex as your pilot. It's C-3PO is your pilot now. So it's actually really cool.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's cool. That's interesting because and I think that's one thing that Disney's done great over the years. Not only do they bring in new attractions, new rides, the ones that are the staples, they've found ways to keep them fresh. And we were talking about the theatrical part there for a second. One of the rides I actually went on that, and I won't say a ride, but it was more like a show, but you're in it, right?
Mhm.
You're on this tour that basically at the time was Alien. I think
Oh yeah,
you know the
yeah.
one I'm talking about.
I think so.
They
Yeah.
converted it because I have a strange feeling it might have been scaring the children's
Mhm.
because this is one of those things where they have the big tube in the middle of the room, the aliens contained in it, and then all of a sudden it breaks out and it's running around the room, and those are the room seats that you're strapped into, and you feel things like rattling around your feet, you feel the
Yep.
breathing behind your ears and stuff like that. It's really cool. But what they did, they turned around and made it funny by making it Lilo and Stitch themed. So it was Stitch that
Yes.
was broke out of the tank and whatnot. But the first time I went down there years ago and that attraction at the Magic Kingdom and at Disney World was open, it was like I said, it was closer to like, you know, Ripley's Aliens, not
Yep.
not Lilo and Stitch themed, which I thought was really funny to see it turn from the one thing to the other because now it's like, okay, great. Now it can be a little comedic and fun, and even more fun that now that Stitch is going to be a, you know, live action movie. But
Well,
I think
no,
that's what
I
they
remember
do.
that.
Same thing with Star Tours.
Yep. That, and that's one of those like the 4D experience, if you will, but it was live action with, those 4D experiences, which now we have movie theaters that have that 4D experience where the seats rumble and you get the misting yeah, it's actually really cool. And there's even some where, you can actually feel the heat of fire, so yeah, I'm all for the immersion, the immersive experience, and I totally just love what the theme parks have done over the years,
Hmm.
and I gotta say it's been amazing how they've, oh crap, my stupid camera is starting to act up.
You're good. So, regardless of that, let's steer this direction. Is obviously we've touched on a few things that you and I have done over the years and whatnot. So, the attractions you've been to, and give me your like top three. What are your favorites that you've experienced over the years or recently, whatever it is? Just at Disney World, Disneyland, whatever.
Okay, so being that we're going to keep it to the Disney parks, I will keep it to Disney parks because I don't want to, because Universal is a completely different animal. It has its own
Correct.
IPs that they work with and
That
stuff.
could be a
So I
whole nother
will,
show.
and it will be, because we'll talk about that later.
That one I don't have as
But
much experience with, but we'll get there. But go.
my number one, obviously, as a Star Wars geek, as a Star Wars fan, Rise of the Resistance. Rise of the Resistance it puts you literally in the movie from walking through the queues to the first part of that, because it's a long ride, believe it or not. You're in this like simulator, like you're in a troop transport, and you get tractor beamed onto a star destroyer, and that's when you start going through this process of being processed into the First Order. They're going to interrogate you and everything, and then you get on the actual ride. So when you see when the doors open from the transport and you walk in and you actually see all of the stormtroopers lined up, and you kind of see the spacing, because you're in that um, cargo bay or whatever, landing bay, and then they process you through. You're in the movie. You feel like you're part of this actual movie, and then when you're going through, you actually see, freaking giant, AT-ATs right in front of you, and you're. That's all I
It's
can say
mind
is
blowing.
it is. It takes you away, and even
You've
from
gotten the
your
point I'm
first
going to get
moment,
to here shortly.
and even from the moment that you walk into Galaxy's Edge, Black Spire Station or whatever they call it, uh, seriously, you feel like you are a part of Star Wars at that point, because everything down to the cast members, to the way that just the layout is, and the way that I can't tell you enough of how 8-year-old Tommy, every time I've gone to this park now, 8-year-old Tommy comes out and just wants to be Luke Skywalker and be a part of all of that. So it's been awesome.
It's
It's
really cool.
it's awesome. And then obviously Smuggler's Run is another good one where you actually get to pilot the Millennium Falcon. And it's actually kind of a game, because if you do everything correctly, and there's 6 of you in it, so everybody's got a job. There's 2 pilots, 2 gunners, and 2 engineers. And if you do things the correct way, you get like a bigger score. But for the most part, you're flying the Millennium Falcon. The cockpit looks like the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and that was awesome. But as far as some of like the mainstay, I loved that. Loved the Indiana Jones ride. That's a fun one. Some of the kind of just cheesy rides, if you will, and I won't even say they're cheesy, but they're fun and they're family fun. The Jungle Cruise has always been a cool one, where you're just driving through and you just basically listen to the boat captain telling really bad puns and
Which
jokes.
is funny enough, is there's been a few comedians that got starts doing the Jungle Cruise at Disney World and stuff, and they've gotten acting gigs out of it. So there's something to that. But
It's all about the
very cool.
delivery, man. It's all about the delivery.
Yeah.
And then as far as like roller coasters go, some of the roller coasters weren't even open for us, which it kind of sucks. But I would have to say I do like the Tower of Terror. And you and I were talking earlier that it used to be the
That's my
Twilight
personal
Zone,
favorite.
the Twilight Zone Tower.
Because of the
So it's all the same. It's all the same, and it still has
Yeah.
that Twilight Zone music and everything else. But they just don't call it the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror anymore.
the one in, correct me if I'm wrong, the one at Disneyland is now the Guardians of the Galaxy Breakout or something like that. They remodeled the whole tower,
Yeah.
which I heard is actually really good, but maybe it's just maybe that, is you talk about IPs and everything. It's like, okay, great. There is not anything that's a Twilight Zone themed anything anywhere. And that was one of those cool things to me, that being a fan of that kind of like sci-fi ballpark, there was something about walking into Hollywood Studios, going to the back corner there where they have the Rock and Roller Coaster, which is now something else, I guess, too. And
It's going to
the
be
Tower
something
of
else.
Terror.
Yeah, it used to be Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Rock and Roller Coaster. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something else in that same vein that they're going to go to. But you go back to the very, and as soon as you walk through those doors, you felt like you were in like a weird mystery movie, like Clue. I'm expecting somebody to be coming out, and now this ending. Whatever it might be. And in the midst of that, though, it's the immersion, it's the pieces to that I just loved about that ride. And then the fact that it is so different from ride to ride. Sometimes you fall up on top, sometimes it's just like on a random in the midst of that. And the thing that it actually does too is it's not only just lifting you up, it's actually roped on both sides of the car. So it's actually pulling you down. So you have no idea where you are. And then the doors open up when you're at the top. And you're like, holy shnikes. And it's not even that tall a building, but you're going like sub-zero when you go some of it too. So That was one of my personal favorites. I have always been, as an engineer, infatuated with the haunted house at the Magic Kingdom, and just how did
The
they
Haunted
do those
Mansions.
gimmicks back
Yeah.
when? Yes, whether it's the floating heads, the ghosts, the dancing, all that kind of stuff. And that was one of those things in that documentary that I was telling you about that it blew my mind how they were doing all that stuff pre-computers, no nothing, just here's all the cool stuff that they did. So it was all literally smoke and mirrors, but it was
Right.
really cool to see. Um, and then I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the Frontierland Park to me, but I always loved the train getaway through the mountains thing. I'm forgetting what the name is, like the Thunder
Oh,
Mountain
you're talking
Railroad, I think.
about Thunder Mountain. Yeah, Thunder Mountain.
Yeah. So that was
So,
always a fun one to me.
so you haven't been to the Magic Kingdom in a while, then? So, like, you haven't been
It's
to
been a
like
good
any
10
of the.
years.
Okay, so when we went this last couple of times, actually no, the first time, about 2 years ago, uh, went to Epcot, and they have the Guardians of the Galaxy ride there, and that's a pretty badass
That's
ride for
fun.
a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster, but it's one of those roller coasters that have the rotating, cars that,
Oh,
so
the
you're on the
car
track and
itself.
yeah, oh
Wow.
my God, it's friggin' awesome. And
Yeah,
that's
no,
a
the
that's
one
a
I'm dying to
badass
go
ride.
to. I'm a big Tron fan. I want to go on the light cycle ride. That is one
I
I want to go
I got to go
on.
on that when during their soft open, and Karen got me the lightning lane, so it was like she wasn't going to go on it. But I'm going to tell you this right now:
There's not a
the
roller
and
coaster person.
not really, but she actually is a lot braver than
Anna's
she
not
used to
either.
be. She's a lot braver than she used to be. But that ride, the initial acceleration, it's breathtaking. It literally is like 0 to 60 in like half a second. That's how
Yeah.
fast it goes. It's just,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
with my gauging on that's the rock and roller coaster, which kind of the same idea back when.
yeah.
But there was something about that being Aerosmith themed that all I remember is right when the lines or the ride started, you would feel the brakes kind of like come off of the roller coaster, and you hear Steven Tyler go, "What?" And then bang, you were just gone. So, it is what it is. But I think there's so I wanted to touch on now that we kind of talked and back and forth on some of our favorite rides and whatnot. I wanted to talk about that immersion piece because I think that's still one of the things from all the theme parks that is still the other one that I think Disney still had the edge on until you start seeing what like to your point, Universal and some of these companies have started catching up on this whole thing. There's parts that I remember, and one that sticks in my mind the most recent was the Toy Story ride that's at Hollywood Studios. The moment you're in the queue on that whole thing, to your point, there's so much to look at, so much to absorb. Mr. Potatoes making insults at people, whatever the hell is going on. It was just that next level of, it's not just the ride that you would get, like, you or I going to a local theme park here in New York, where you're literally in a queue. There's nothing going on except you and I busting each other's balls. You had that immersion factor. There was always something to look at, something to see. To your point with the Rise of the Resistance thing, the ride queue is part of the ride. It just makes it that much more immersive. And I do think that some of these other companies are still getting better and better at it, but still playing catch up to Disney in that avenue. So give me your thoughts on some of those things that you waited on. Obviously, there's still exceptions to that. Is the Haunted Mansion doesn't exactly have the best queue, but it is what
Well,
it is.
well, no, it doesn't. But when it comes to like putting you in just even in some of the lands, like, when say you're in Epcot and you're eating or drinking your way around the world, when you're in even those small sliver of space, you are in those countries. They make you feel like you are in those countries. Um, you know, but the
Don't end your
cues.
drinking efforts around the world, by the way, with Japan. That was not the best thing after having beer and fish and chips and everything, and ending with sake. It was not not the best.
I'll
Helpful hint.
take your word for it because I no longer drink, but that's just,
I know, I'm just being
but
funny.
I know. But I will say that when it comes to the queues, though, they have gotten much better because they realize that there are a lot of long lines for these, and they want to make it somewhat to be visually stimulating for you. So uh, when you're in those queues, like for Rise of the Resistance, once you start getting further in, you start seeing more of like being in like a Resistance or a Rebel base. And then when you're going through, even Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, when you're going through some of the queues, uh, you're going into this what looked like it was a nice, you know,
Hollywood
hotel at one time,
hotel. Enter if you
but now
dare.
it's like a haunted hotel looking, uh, I would have to say that they are very good at it, but the other parks are catching up. Um, and I would say, I'll save this for, but Universal, because they have like the Harry Potter and Jurassic Park, they make
Mario
those
World.
part right, exactly, and it's going to become even more immersive. They want you to be in these areas. They want you to feel like you are, in whatever land they're or park they're in. And I'm actually looking forward to Universal's new set of parks that they have in Florida, but
Yeah.
we'll go in there. But as
Like I
far as
said,
the immersion
but that's the point.
aspect,
Yeah. So, go ahead.
but to your point about Toy Story, especially in Florida, they have a once you're in there, and you're in, it could be um, any kid's backyard. But they have a barbecue place, a restaurant that actually, um, the gimmick is that once you hear Andy coming into, everybody stops. The wait staff, even the patrons stop what they're doing to kind of pretend like they're the toys. And then once he walks away, and they're like, "Oh, clear," and then like everybody's back to normal and stuff like that. But it's a fun gimmick. And I
It's
remember
that
back
next
in
that
the
little extra.
yeah, and I remember back in the '90s when you went through some of them, they used to have the Honey I Shrunk the Kids park where you actually felt like you were, shrunk down because you had to traverse through blades of grass and
Yep.
Lego pieces and stuff like that that were towering
In
over you.
It's not the same there anymore, but I think there's a little piece of that playground that you're talking about still there at Hollywood Studios, but there used to be a store right there next to it that was Roger Rabbit themed, and it had the
Mhm.
what's it called? The steamroller for the dip machine that had rolled
Yep.
and broke through the wall. And it was all just there's things you could open up that would be like making Looney Tunes characters noises and stuff like that. It was really amusing. But is that, like you said, that next little piece to it that was, you wouldn't get at, I'd say the mom and pop, you know, theme park. But um the one that you see online all the time, and I believe this was the renovation of the 2000 Leagues Under the Sea, the Finding Nemo, or it became Finding Nemo.
Mhm.
It's a submarine ride, right?
Right.
When you're in the queue for that, there's some movie that plays, but it's not really a movie. It's a video of Crush, the
Mhm.
turtle, that somebody is actually on the other side of that, listening to everybody asking questions to the turtle and all that kind of stuff. And it's like crazy animation for it to actually do what it's doing in hand right while you're sitting there and somebody's talking with that. And I just can't believe that that's where the technology for these Imagineers has gotten to. And I feel like that Toy Story one I touched on with Mr. Potato Head making
Mhm.
insults and goofing around and making jokes as like the ringleader of the Toy Story ride. But that was a puppet. It wasn't
Right.
3D animated on the wall because it's a turtle in a fish tank. you
Right.
you can't have a puppet of that. Mr. Potato Head, you can have a little person, pretending they're, moving the joysticks around to get it to do what it needs to do for the show. You got to do something clever, and it's like literally watching. I can't believe the videos that I've seen of them with that Finding Nemo ride I've seen online. It's wild.
So going circling back to what you're talking about, they still
Yep.
have the submarines, like the actual submarines here in Disneyland. where you actually go into the submarine, but it is Finding Nemo theme, and it's in Tomorrowland, and you're actually on a submarine, so you're underwater. But the way that the immersion of it, they make it, not to sound funny because you're a submarine, but you're literally underwater with this. I mean, it's still obviously safe, but where you're sitting is below water level, and it's Nemo themed. But the one in Florida is kind of like a rail ride where you pretend like you're underwater, and you're like in a like a cart that's very reminiscent of the ones that you would be in at the Haunted Mansion. So it's a pretty cool ride, but I think this was the first time that Karen had ever been on the submarine ride, which was actually which was a cool experience. But you literally are kind of packed in there, and you're looking through a porthole, and it's dark. So it's actually it's a pretty cool ride.
It's interesting.
Yep.
It's something you don't get to do at home, right?
Nope.
So, but I want to talk some of the other parts because there's for things like that, there's just as many rides as there are, like we were saying, experiences. And then they also do some things like the Hollywood backlot tour and some things like that, the Indiana Jones shows. You literally, to your point on some of the things earlier, and that backlot tour where the oil tanker blows up and comes towards you and there's water everywhere, you do feel the fire. That is not just a little subtle boom. You do feel the heat emanating at you.
So that's
they do a good job of
Universal.
getting you right up on the action.
Right.
I could have sworn that was at Hollywood Studios.
They don't have a backlot tour anymore, which is something that we thought was disappointing. So, and they don't have
they got rid of it.
Backlot tour at Orlando, but I'm hoping to see that they have, or Universal, I believe they still have that. So again, you compare the two parks or the two locations. California doesn't have the landmass that obviously Orlando has. So so everything is kind of
that was still at Hollywood Studios, because the reason I knew that it was there at one point, because just to quote IPs and stuff, they take you around the tour parts, and they had Rocketeer stuff, which is Disney.
Right.
So it was there at one point. So I guess I didn't realize they got rid of that one. So I guess that segues me into the next thing. There's some new things that are leaving, and one that actually hit home to me a little bit. And I was hoping they'd find a way to update it, but Muppet Vision 3D was always hilarious to me. And unfortunately is on the chopping block for whatever the next thing is at Disney World. And that's the unfortunate catch as you try to get new things in and you have to move things around. You said there's limited land in both places. So how do you juggle? Unfortunately, sometimes certain things that even certain, a group of people love still take the axe. And that was one of the ones I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to see the old guys yelling at people from the, literally right there anymore.
And I got to say that I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of those things that have been around for a long time. And
sponsored by Kodak, Tommy.
Exactly. And believe it or not, there is a Buffalo Bills helmet in the rafters, so that's a kind of,
I heard that story recently.
Shout out to, but Karen and I actually got to see it. We got to see it. This is the last year for Muppet Vision. And I believe that they will be this is the last year of Muppet Vision. So if you're going to go to Florida, and you love that, and it's, honestly, it is dated. It's very dated, but at the same time, it's the nostalgic. It's the nostalgia of it. And that where that is located is just before the tunnel that you walk through to go to Galaxy's Edge. So
that's part of it then, probably. But to that point, that's what you got to do. But I was just hoping that was the soul of that ride, or a soul of that show could have been updated. I thought was kind of it's a 3D show turned into one of those 4D ones where you have the stuff in the feet or whatever, and it would have been a nudge and still be able to keep something pretty cool. It's like, hey, it's gotten a facelift.
Right, exactly.
Because it was fun, and maybe it's just the my brand of comedy. Maybe that's more or less it. And But to that point, I hope they find some way to do something, because that is obviously another Disney property that is still viable to this day, that I would think they're going to find something to do with the Muppets up
You,
at some point.
you know, that's the thing though, is it is a viable property, but they have not done right by the Muppets, I think. I think that they every once in a while they throw out a lackluster Muppet movie, and it's just to kind of squeeze out a little bit of change from an older intellectual property, and that's
Yeah.
kind of where I want to
Keep the
segue into
license.
is right, and utilize it, before you sell it off. So
Yeah,
this is what I want to segue to is
that's the one I wanted to say.
as
So can I give you one pause
go
before we
ahead,
move off the Muppets?
go ahead.
Did you ever watch the Muppets Mayhem when it was on Disney Plus? Because you being a rock and roll fan like I am, you will die laughing watching that.
Honestly, I haven't watched that. So if it's
Anna and
still on
I
Disney
watched it.
Plus, I'll watch it.
It's still there. It was one of those silly, stupid things, but it's about the Electric Mayhem, the band that Animals in.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, great. We got to give this a try. And I was floored. The amount of celebrities, the fun that's in it. Freaking Cheech and Chong are even in it as themselves. Like they've been sitting in the basement of this house since the 70s. It's just silly. Anyway, where you were,
So
as you were.
so as intellectual properties go, now obviously Disney has um, taken uh, kind of a stranglehold on a lot of intellectual properties like Marvel, Star Wars. They own The Simpsons now, which The Simpsons have their own little park land in Universal, which after this year it's going to be going away because obviously Disney owns it.
Somebody don't want to pay the royalties.
Exactly. Which
I'm
eventually,
surprised there's still the Spider-Man ride and stuff at the Universal Park in Orlando too, because that one I'm surprised, because you would think they'd want to suck that back in. And that was an awesome ride, by the way. But to your point, go ahead.
but some of that, yeah, and that stuff is actually going to be going away as well eventually because as Disney starts bulldozing their way through, getting all of the intellectual properties for Marvel, which Sony had Spider-Man, even like they had the Hulk ride, which is still the Hulk, but eventually that's going to go away as well, and it's going to be
Yeah.
rebranded as something else. But you know, going into that, what about the mainstay Disney characters that are now public domain? That they've taken Winnie the Pooh and Pinocchio
Horror
and
movie.
all of these, and they turned them into some very grotesque horror movies. What are your thoughts on it? On all of these, what you thought were the characters that only belonged to Disney, but now are public domain. And what are your thoughts about it?
That's what happens after literally 100 years, right? Something like
Yeah,
that. So this is why everything gets a tweak every few years, Tommy. So, okay, great. The only Mickey Mouse that's really public domain is Steamboat Mickey right now, right? It's another 5 or so, 10 years before Mickey Mouse is actually legit public domain. But you have to look at the other people like Popeye's a public domain. You mentioned Winnie the Pooh and everybody from the original stories
right.
of Winnie the Pooh and everything. There was some other one that was done recently in a horror movie that I'm blanking on too.
Pinocchio.
Pinocchio, it had to been. So I honestly I'm glad that nerds get to have some fun and do something weird like that with it to a certain extent. That means um is it John Oliver that used to be on the Daily Show that's got his own show now as a media guy. Um when Mickey Mouse became a public domain for Steamboat Mickey. He had him,
Mhm.
dancing and trying to, sell a bunch of shit on his show. So, he goes, and here's Steamboat Mickey, everybody, just for the hell of it because he could. So, um, I'm surprised. It is what it is. It's legal fun. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen with everybody. Eventually, that'll get down to Marvel. Those characters will be public domain laws. They don't keep refreshing, tweaking, all those kind of things. It's just what happens with the
Right.
copyright law here in the U.S. So,
But yeah, so I was thinking about that. I was like, I was like, man, you know, because you even on your picture for this, you have the picture of Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse at the front of the
Mhm.
Magic Kingdom, and that's a very iconic picture. Now, can you imagine if that was a different picture where it was like a beheaded Walt Disney and Mickey with a knife in his hand?
And
It's
Mickey
kind of
climbing up
creepy.
his neck going like a
So
Simpsons
so
episode. It's like Itchy and
so
Scratchy
going
Land, man.
right. So going back to the intellectual properties that they do own right now, what do you think of the state that of the product that they're putting out? And the reason why I ask you is because Karen had asked me, you know, do I look forward to seeing the new Captain America movie? And honestly, I'm not. I'm not. I will see it when it's on Disney Plus, but I'm not going to rush to see it in the movie theater because to me, and nothing against Anthony Mackie, and obviously nothing against Harrison Ford. It's just it's another Marvel superhero movie that I think that greatness has kind of gone away now because it just seems like
Watered it
it's a
down.
money right. Everything is a money grab now. We're going to see how many toys we can fill the shelves at Ollie's because
There's
nobody's
shitty
buying them
toys
at
too, by the
store,
way.
right? Exactly,
I just
you
saw
know,
the
and
ones there
it's
for
like,
the new Cat movie, and I was slightly disappointed. I was just in Target the other day, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go down the toy aisle like I tend to do anyway, because you know. So,
I, I
and
I
I was
agree
like,
with
oh my
you.
god, it makes Chinese plastic look cheap with what these things were doing. So, and maybe the tariffs
Hmm.
thing is what it is at this point. But if that's how American toys are gonna look, that's pretty damn horrific that these things were looking the way they were. But to the sum of your original question, Bob Iger himself, the CEO of Disney, who had gotten them where they got to, the stock was never higher, and then he left. Obviously, they dropped the ball with the streaming thing and a million other things, and they have since asked him to come back. The second tour hasn't been quite as good as the original with him. But one of the things he noticed around the turn of the millennium, he was in the parks and he was watching one of the parades, and he goes, none of these things are our products at all. Because the parade was basically every name a Pixar movie and all those kind of things. It was like, yeah, that's it. It was all Pixar IP basically that was in the Disney parade that was going down Main Street USA. So he sat there and he goes, "Well, first thing I'm doing is I'm not extending Pixar. I'm buying Pixar." So now he
Right.
owned all those characters. And then he went from there and he goes, "What else screams Disney brand?" And that's when you saw them buy Marvel as the first
Hmm.
big one. And then the next one was Star Wars, clearly. They already had that relationship with them. If you probably talked to George Lucas at that time, if he was going to sell it to anybody, that probably was who he would have rather it went to because they'd already had the rides. They knew how to handle the IP. It wasn't just we saw otherwise. But at the time, right? It's just those kind of things. But right now, what really is Disney?
Right. Exactly. I mean, it
A
used to
Mickey Mouse
be the
Club that
Disney
my
Prince.
daughter
Right.
likes watch.
Right, right. No, no, you're right. What was Mickey? What was Disney in the day? It was the Disney princesses, and it was the original Disney princess. You know, you got Snow White
Yes,
and Cinderella, and Ariel, and you know, and
I'd
I'm
name
all
one.
for. I'm all for expanding and having a diverse universe. But again, it's like what is Disney now?
Yep. And
When
I think
you
I have the
sat
perfect example of what Disney is right now because it only paints the picture perfectly that they don't know what Disney is. They don't know how to make a new brand of any kind, and what they're doing is just taking, hey, remember the Little Mermaid? Here it is in live action. Good luck.
right,
We're gonna, like I mentioned earlier in the show, we're gonna get that newest version of that with Lilo and Stitch. Moana 2 just came out, but they're going to make a Moana live action movie with The
but
Rock in it.
but but to that point though, that's not even Disney. That's Hollywood in general. Hollywood in
Yeah,
general just has absolutely no imagination anymore. So it's
I
either
actually got a
we're
comment
going
here.
to what's that?
Mhm. We
Oh,
had a
there you go.
comment from a Sandman Beast who is agreeing that what is it? He was at the trade show, and I can concur to this because it felt just that way. I thank you, Sandman. I appreciate the
Yeah,
comment because it's nice to see that we're not the only ones seeing the literal writing on the wall. And I think that's their biggest thing there. They have an identity crisis right now, and they don't know what to do. And the reason you bring somebody back like Bob Iger is hoping to, stir the pot back to where you were. But they
right the ship,
need
so to speak.
somebody to actually have the balls to take a risk on something, whether it is making X decision for a Marvel movie or coming up with your own new IP and running with it. Like I said, the most original new thing that Disney's done in a few years is probably those Moana movies. Am I wrong?
Right, right. No, you're right. You're
So,
right. And the thing is that they, you know, they've the problem with Disney is this. They have saturated the market with a bunch of things as a money grab. They're not putting out quality, true to the story kind of stuff anymore. They're taking cartoon intellectual properties and it's like, well, we got nothing better coming out of our minds. Well, let me circle back. Remember,
Disney Plus is a perfect example of that.
they would make straight to DVD or straight to VHS sequels to movies that they had, which is like, okay, well, some of them were just absolutely horrible and made no sense. And then,
Yep.
but I will go to my beloved Star Wars. My beloved Star Wars, and I do consume everything that Disney puts out because I'm a Star Wars fan and I want to see what they're doing with either the characters I love or or characters that they're new characters that they're trying to introduce. I want to see that. I want to see what it is.
Yep.
But to me, you they're doing it in a way to where you're not telling a compelling story anymore. You know, I mean, The
Well, it's watered
Mandalorian
down like we
was
were talking about.
right, right.
There's
The
nothing
Mandalorian
original to
was
it. You're telling the
good.
same story over again.
Right. And the thing is that also, Disney has allowed themselves to get embroiled in in some controversies and stuff like that. And to me, they had taken away, and I don't know if I'm, going into the realm of the Kathleen Kennedy controversies and stuff like that when she made the comment of there's not a lot of Star Wars content out there that you need to so we have to figure out how to make new stories and I agree with a
That's
lot
the
of
point. You can make new
fans,
stories.
but the point is that there was comic books, there were novels that even George Lucas himself had put his check mark on and said, yes, I like that. I mean, Shadows of the Empire it was, something that would have opened the door to a plethora of different characters and storylines
and
and things that you could have went back to.
and the beauty is you didn't have to just remake those books. You could have
Right.
still taken the ideas, pieced them together how you wanted to, and still had fun with it and be original. Just don't do it like Fox tried to do with the X-Men movies back in the day, and you're fine. That's the model to stay away.
Well, and that's the other part of it too, though, is that they have kind of done that with the character of
Yeah,
Grand Admiral Thrawn. They took that character and they put
100%.
him in Rebels and even oh yeah, it was Rebels. So and
Yep.
now
And then brought him
they
into Ahsoka live action,
yeah, exactly, and
and it was
that
good. I
was
love Thrawn.
exactly. But why couldn't they do that with Prince Xizor? Which I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, but why couldn't they
Sorry.
do that? With some of these other
Where's my
characters
Dash
from these
Rendar movie?
novels. 100%. Again, Shadows of the Empire. Tell if they're
Yeah,
going to tell stories like Rogue One, which I think is an absolutely great Star Wars movie, and it tells that story between Episode 3 and Episode 4. What they could have done a Dash Rendar, which is a bridge between um, the episode 5 and 6, because because it was the side story of that was trying to find where they had Han Solo.
Yeah. So let's take this and spin it back to where we were talking with the theme parks. If you're not making new IP, what the hell does your park look like in 10 years? Nostalgia land?
100%. Well, that's the thing though, is again, they keep the mainstays that are great, like the Haunted Mansion. Haunted Mansion's still a great and fun ride.
100%.
When it's not breaking down, in between, so, but at the same time, they are revamping rides to new characters, or just, and it's not even revamping really. It's kind of just, putting on a new facade, and calling it something different. But for the most part, you're right. If you're not bringing out something new, what does your park look like? I will have to say this: between
Just gonna keep going up.
Disneyland, right? Well, between Disneyland and Disney World, I will have to say Disney World is completely, in my opinion, completely different from anything that Disneyland has going on. And the reason being is that it seems to be nicer. It's exactly what you think the Magic Kingdom is supposed to look like, whereas Disneyland kind of seemed kind of old and
perfected.
Yeah, right. But
Right.
But it seemed like it's like they don't hold the same standards that Orlando has. And Karen and I were talking about that. We were talking about the how even just the employees there are not as nice as they are in Florida. And I think it's almost like Disneyland is the place that Walt forgot about. And all of the resources go to Orlando, which it kind of seems like we're keeping it here because it employs a bunch of Californians.
Correct. But to that point, they still do get the exclusive ride here and there. They did get Galaxy's Edge first, but to that point, like you said, they don't have as much land to play around with, so they have to get that much more clever. I think Mary in our comment section here might have summarized your thought perfectly.
Yep.
Disneyland is a theme park. Disney World is a vacation spot. You have your theme park, resort.
Hits the nail on the head. Hits the nail on the head. Perfect point, Mary. That's exactly it. Disneyland is a theme park, and Disney World is a vacation spot. I'll even one up it a little bit and say Disney World is a vacation destination. A lot of people save up money for years so that they can afford to bring the entire family. And Karen and I had talked
Where
about
if you
that.
go to Los Angeles and Anaheim, you might go do a few other things while you're there.
Right, exactly.
Kind of like you right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to tell you, it was very disappointing to even the food options that you have in Disneyland are not as good as they were in the Walt Disney World. Disney World, you could tell that they definitely they're top notch, and Disneyland was kind of if you could choke down a piece of pizza somewhere, but you couldn't get reservations to most of the restaurants because they were already booked up, and but it is what it is.
So I want to end the show actually talking a little bit about that piece like you were just doing here, because we only got a few more minutes left, my friend. I want to talk about the merch a little bit here to end the show, because for every cool thing you get, like a lightsaber you get at Galaxy's Edge, there's some really just stuff that's just great, normal, everyday theme park level stuff. Okay, great. I got a shirt that says Magic Kingdom or the Disney ears. Yeah. Whatever it is, things like that. So give me a little summary of what you saw while you're wandering around the park, because I know what you get in the new pieces like Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which, like you said, part of the shopping there is the part of the immersion, not just the stuff you get. So you made a lightsaber. That's completely different. You could tell us that versus
Yeah.
going to a store and going, "Hey, here's my cash. I want that."
So 2 years ago, that was part of what we did was go and build a lightsaber. I've wanted to do that ever since I knew that that was part of a thing. And it exactly is that. It's immersive. You are they tell this great story of being kind of an underground because you don't want the First Order to see what's going on, and so you're using pieces of scrap to make a lightsaber, but it's hush hush because nobody wants to know about it. Um, so, but it for the amount that you pay for, I would say that it is it worth it? I would say yes, it is because you're doing it, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to kind of grasp because out of you got to pick like one faction out of four, and then you're just like, well, I want to do more because I want to make another one from a different one. I want to make
Hmm.
a power and control one. Um, but either way, but the thing about it is that you can go and buy more kyber crystals, so you can actually change the color of your blade. So like I have all of the colors of kyber crystals now for my one lightsaber, but at
Collection.
the same time, I can. You can still go and buy the legacy lightsabers, which is what I bought this last time around. And the time before that, I bought a Count Dooku Jedi lightsaber because, for those of you who don't know, Count Dooku was a Jedi before he became a Sith. So so
Watch your Star
I have
Wars
that.
Visions, I think was the show, right? Or
Yep. So and which now, because I'm that guy, I want to now try to find the Count Dooku Sith or the Darth Tyrannus lightsaber. So then I have them both because they're both got the curved hilt with the little pike thing that sticks out. But the Sith one, it actually is a really kind of cool because it's a little bit longer, badass. But
full of quirks,
um,
but to that point, you got to make it. You wasn't just
yep,
here's your
yep,
stuff. You had a show to go along with it.
yep.
And those are the kind of things that when I went to Disney World were not there. It's like, okay, great. You want an Indiana Jones hat after you went and saw the stunt spectacular? Great. Here's your fedora. It's like no bigs.
You get
But
you get to build your own whip.
yeah, exactly. But to that point, one of the things that I wanted to do when I was down there is on the Disney Boardwalk. They actually have the House of Blues. I wanted to go because Dan Aykroyd owns that franchise. And I was like, if I'm going to be able to ever find anything Blues Brothers, that's probably the place to go. And I ended up walking out with a fedora and a couple of shirts that I would have probably never gotten elsewhere. Especially, this is, like I said, 10 years ago. The internet wasn't the internet with t-shirts like it is now. Just saying. So, but there is those things. And to that point, I'm glad you got that experience to go along with it because I do
Yep.
think that is something really cool that they get to do, or is the fact that when you go to certain restaurants and everything, it is Star Wars themed, the drinks, the food, all these things. It is cool. And it's for the little kids, I remember that we did this with my little cousins, and I'm like, yes, breakfast. I didn't care. It was like the Mickey Mouse breakfast on the steamboat.
Yep.
It was just something cool, but they had all Disney characters. It was that extra piece to it. So on that note, as we are basically at the hour, is there anything else you would like to talk about, Disneyland or otherwise, before we for this week until not this coming week, but next week, I believe is no, it'll be next week. So I go ahead.
So actually, I think we've beaten the dead horse of Disney. But
Yeah.
I will be going to Hollywood. Karen and I will be in Hollywood tomorrow. So we're going to be doing some walking around, get to see some of the sights, but we are going to make it a point because we're going to circle back to one of our previous episodes when I actually go and take some pictures, maybe some video of the Whiskey A Go Go and the Viper Room. So for those of you
There
who
you
don't
go.
know, the Whiskey A Go Go is like the place that back in the even now, but back in the
Still is
day,
rock
if
and
you
roll
were
mecca.
in a Yeah, if you were in a rock band, a heavy metal band, the hair metal days, you cut your teeth at the Whiskey A Go Go. And the Viper Room
Guns N'
is
Roses,
infamous.
Motley
Yeah,
Crue, everybody.
and the Viper Room is infamous for a very good reason. For those of you who don't know, Joaquin Phoenix's brother, River Phoenix, he actually died there, and I
Yeah,
think he was part of the 27 Club now because of that. And for those of you who
technically,
don't
yeah,
know
I
what a
believe so.
27 Club is, Google it. I don't even have to get
Yeah,
into it.
that's a whole other
But
episode, especially that
yep,
talent.
yes. But I am,
So
so we're going to do that. But then we are also going to Universal Hollywood. So I'll be able to give you what the differences and nuances of
this is
California's other
California.
theme park to what is going on in Orlando. So stay
Very
tuned,
cool.
kiddos. We will be there, and I will be throwing on some content here and there in between now and the show, and we'll keep this ball rolling. So thank you to everybody who's been watching, who is watching, and those of you who commented, Mr. Sandman Beast and Mary Flynn. Thank you again for being a part of our
Yeah.
show.
And
And
thank you for the
take it
record
away.
amount of people actually in the chat for a change. So that was great because, like I said, we've had a ballpark 50 people in and out of the show tonight. So we thank you very much. So on that note, next week we're having a Rochester staple join us on the show. This is the toy store that is called the Yankee Clipper. It is in the Village Gate here at Rochester. Great family, great people. We're going to have them on the show to tell the story of the Yankee Clipper and obviously talk toy collecting and have some fun. We want to make sure that they're still a Rochester staple going forward. So we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to do to help them be a voice out in the world. So if you're in the Rochester area, please check out the Yankee Clipper at the Village Gate, and you will see them here next week. Other than that, thank you very much, everybody. Great having you all here. Tommy, safe travels. I hope all was fun. And we will see everybody next weekend. Make sure you check us and anywhere you can get your podcasting pleasures from. We will be here Sunday evenings at our normal time, 7 o'clock Eastern. So
Allegedly,
making sure we
allegedly at
accommodate
our
for the
normal
world
time.
traveler here. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, cheers, everybody. Have a great week.
Good night.